Lieutenant Governor Joe Garcia announced that he will step down to become president of the Western Interstate Commission for Higher Education starting next year. In his new position, he'll assist 16 Western states in higher ed and will have access to a $25 million annual budget. David, this came as a little bit of a surprise. I didn't realize that, some people were thinking that Lieutenant Governor Garcia wasn't going to complete the full term. Now we think about what's next. If you're John Hickenlooper, what kind of lieutenant governor do you want by your side between now and the end of his term?
Well, I think one thing is Lieutenant Governor Garcia may have made a determination that John Hickenlooper is going to finish John Hickenlooper's term, that John Hickenlooper is not going to be the vice president under Hillary Clinton, that she's likely to pick somebody else. So no point in sticking around for this. He moved to a great job, which really is a perfect fit for his expertise, and his background in a gubernatorial office really makes him well suited for this. The last guy who left the lieutenant governor's office was Mike Callahan, who resigned as Roy Romer's governor to then become the master franchisee in Colorado for Kenny Rogers Roasted Chicken, which was apparently is not as prestigious around this table as running an interstate education commission. And then he actually did try a little bit of a political comeback. I think there was a state legislative vacancy in the suburbs that he applied for a few years ago, and his long ago lieutenant governorhood, I believe he was defeated by Daniel Kagan for the vacancy committee there. So I think a smart move by Garcia, and who comes in, it's so Machiavellian. We've been talking around the table, but I will let Ed explain some of that.
Well, Ed, you're getting the intro here. We've talked about some of the names that have popped up already have been Kerry Kennedy. Personally, I think Joe Neguse would be a good, he was the Democratic candidate for Secretary of State this last time. He has the kind of Hickenlooper nice guy brand. Are there other names? What do you think is going to happen?
Well, I think Eric Sonderman, when I interviewed him for the story I wrote on this, said it pretty well, that Hickenlooper has two ways to go here. One is you bring an up-and-comer into your lieutenant governorship, because you know that this lieutenant governorship doesn't roll into the governorship. One, you're Hickenlooper, you're sticking around. And two, let's put this right out there. I think one of the things that becomes very clear by Joe Garcia leaving rather than running for governor in 2018 is that Ken Salazar is going to run for governor from the Democratic side, and he's going to clear the field. So you're looking at one of two things if you're Hickenlooper. One is an up-and-comer who really has had roles and now will have the chance to have some sort of executive-level experience, get to know the state better, maybe parlay that into another office run. Neguse is far and away the name that comes out the most with that. He was impressive in the Secretary of the State run, obviously not winning, but earned accolades even from Wayne Williams, who beat him and speaks very well of him. And this is the kind of role where he can raise his visibility level a little bit and then see what's out there in terms of, you know, a congressional, a statewide race for 2018. The other thing you could do if you're Hickenlooper is you could turn to somebody who is basically term limited or has finished their terms and just wants to ride out kind of helping out the state right now. And there's an interesting number of representatives and senators. I mean, you even think of someone like a Pat Stedman, who is about to finish up his Senate term, who knows pretty much where everything in state government goes because he's run the JBC. That could be one way to go with this. But I think those are the two ways you go if you're Hickenlooper. And as far as reading the tea leaves as to what Hickenlooper does, I don't think any of us can do that.
It may be barley remnants rather than tea leaves, but I get what you're saying. Ben, we've also heard about Kerry Kennedy. In fact, she was mentioned in the Denver Post article about this. What do you think the chances are that we'll see her in the lieutenant governor position?
I'd say unlikely, and while I do agree with Ed about the sort of possibilities, I think that the notion of bringing an up-and-comer into the office is dampened by the fact that there's a Senate, Republican-controlled state Senate, and that they'll need to approve this person, and I just don't see why they would do someone a favor like that. So I would expect to see somebody who's more of maybe an operative type. I've heard a couple of names like Marguerite Salazar or even Alan Salazar, which would be a departure from their past, but also keeping in their tradition of public service. Another name from the legislature that could be a possibility is Dickie Lee Hullinghurst. I think it's going to be somebody who is clearly on the side of the governor, but who's not going to get a leg up from the position. So, and as far as what Hickenlooper is going to do, I frankly don't think he's going to go anywhere. So.
Patty, Hickenlooper he is unpredictable. It's hard to be, as Ed mentioned, but he has definitely a particular brand. Do you think he's going to want to stick to that brand for lieutenant governor? Is that position important enough to keep with the brand?
Well, let's face it, we will never have a lieutenant governor as cool as Joe Garcia. You know, riding the motorcycle, cool, driving the truck, a really great lieutenant governor who actually did something, which we also have to remember that the lieutenant governor mostly naps, or could mostly nap, but he also ran higher education. I mean, he really stepped up and did a lot, and he is now going to his first love and leaving the state service, and I think that's a smart move for him. As I said, we will never get as cool a lieutenant governor. There's got to be two words have to haunt this appointment, and that is Bill Vidal. Let's not forget what happened when Hickenlooper left to Vidal as basically a placeholder who wasn't going to run for mayor, and then kind of thought maybe he would want to run for mayor. So, and Vidal was a really good mayor. He'd run public works. He did a good job. So if you're going to put a placeholder in, which I think makes a lot more sense than branding an up-and-comer and giving them on-the-job training when you've got to get past the Republican Senate, find someone who really does want to be a placeholder. There's some great names out there of people who've done so much public service for the state, would like to continue, might not ride a motorcycle, but would be really great. So I think we're going to see a lot of those names come out. The last thing I can see Hickenlooper wanting to do is appoint someone who would want to run for governor and create that whole mess coming along.